The date is November 4th, 1944, and the soldiers of the U.S. 28th Infantry Division find themselves ensnared within a brutal meat grinder located in the lightless depths of the Hürtgen Forest. Major Robert T. Hazlitt watches with absolute horror as a German Panther tank powers its way out of the dense tree line, rolling menacingly toward a foxhole where his men are taking cover. Hazlitt screams a desperate warning to his soldiers, yet the heavy steel tracks of the Panther grind directly over the hole and continue their relentless advance. In the wake of this terror, Hazlitt seizes his radio and issues an immediate order for everyone to fall back. He understands that if they are to have any hope of surviving this onslaught, they will require urgent reinforcements and the heavy support of American armor. Roughly a mile away from the chaos, 9 Sherman tanks belonging to the 707th Tank Battalion are struggling against the elements, nearly drowning in thick mud as they fight to navigate the treacherous forest terrain. Platoon leader Lieutenant Raymond Fleig is positioned atop the lead Sherman, guiding the column forward. Suddenly, his tank lurches violently as a massive explosion erupts beneath the hull. Inside the cramped compartment, there is a chorus of shouts and immediate confusion. The crew quickly realizes they have struck a German mine. Fortunately, no one has sustained injuries, but the lead tank is now hopelessly stuck in the mire, effectively blocking the rest of the platoon on a narrow, restricted path. Thinking with remarkable speed, Fleig calls for a tow cable and instructs his platoon sergeant to secure the next tank in the line to the crippled Sherman, utilizing the disabled vehicle as a makeshift anchor. The following tank carefully maneuvers around the obstacle, nearly sliding down a steep gorge in the process, but the cable manages to hold firm. They successfully get one tank past the disabled Sherman, but it is clear that the rest of the platoon will take an eternity to be freed from the mud. Fleig knows he cannot afford to wait. He climbs onto the now operable Sherman, ordering its original commander to remain with the lingering tanks and catch up as soon as they are mobile. He slams the hatch shut, and the lone Sherman begins to churn forward into the woods. Back at the front lines, lacking any armor support, Hazlitt leads his battered infantry units as they retreat into a nearby village. In the distance, a 45-ton Panther tank lurches forward, followed closely by a menacing column of Panzer IVs. It is at that precise moment that Hazlitt detects the sound of another engine roaring directly behind his position. An American Sherman rolls into view, heavily camouflaged by layers of mud, broken branches, and forest debris. Hazlitt sprints toward the tank, pointing urgently toward the numerous panzers gathering on the rising ground. Although Fleig is vastly outnumbered, he offers a grim nod of understanding, and the Sherman surges forward to meet the threat. Inside the lead German Panther, the commander meticulously scans the American positions lying ahead. He observes the infantry scattered within foxholes and throughout the village, noting that they appear worn out and dangerously exposed. He orders his driver to accelerate, intending to charge the enemy and seize control of the village. The driver presses the pedal, and the Panther advances. 200 yards away, Fleig maneuvers his Sherman onto the crest of a ridge and spots the Panther's long 75mm gun pointed directly at the retreating American infantry. The German tank's side is exposed, presenting a perfect opportunity. Fleig relays the enemy's position to his gunner. Gunner shot, tank 200. The target is set. Fire! The Sherman discharges its main gun. The shell slices through the freezing air and strikes the side of the Panther with a brilliant flash of light. However, there is no penetration. Only a dull thud echoes through the forest. The Panther comes to a halt. Fleig immediately snaps out the next command. Again, fire! The second round impacts the target, but once again, there is no visible damage. Fleig is momentarily confused until he hears the loader shouting a frantic question. What is going on? They realize that only high-explosive shells are currently in the ready rack. A chill runs down Fleig's spine. In the frantic chaos of the mud trail, he had switched to a different Sherman, and the previous commander had loaded high-explosive rounds instead of armor-piercing ones. Get me AP, move, Fleig commands. The loader reaches toward the sponson rack to retrieve the armor-piercing rounds, but his hands have begun to shake uncontrollably. I can't get to AP, sir. The turret's in the way. This is the worst possible scenario for a tank crew. To access the armor-piercing ammunition, they are forced to rotate the turret away from their target in the heat of a battle. Instinctively, Fleig orders the gunner to turn it. Every passing second feels potentially lethal as his eyes remain locked onto the enemy's muzzle brake. Then something unexpected occurs. The Panther's hatches suddenly swing open. Inside the German Panther, panic has erupted. Stunned by the two heavy impacts, the crew mistakenly believes their tank is about to catch fire. The Germans scramble out of the vehicle, expecting flames or an internal ammunition explosion. However, there are no flames and no signs of penetration. The German commander grabs his binoculars and searches for the source of the attack. It is then that he spots the Sherman with its turret traversed away. He realizes the American tank hit them with the wrong ammunition, and that evacuating was a catastrophic error. They have surrendered their advantage. Back in! Back into the tank! It was a high-explosive shell, he screams. The Panther crew scrambles back aboard, all while under intense fire from the American infantry. Their mistake, however, has bought Fleig a few precious seconds. The Sherman's turret finally stops its rotation, allowing the loader to quickly reach the sponson rack. He hauls up armor-piercing rounds as fast as humanly possible, clinging to them as if his very life depends on it. Simultaneously, the Panther's turret begins to swing back toward the Sherman. Inside the German tank, the driver revs the engine to build hydraulic pressure for the turret. Inside Fleig's Sherman, the gunner fights to bring his own weapon back into position. The two steel machines race to get their guns on target. The loader slams an M61 armor-piercing shell into the breech. Up! But the Panther reaches the point of fire first. Fire! A high-velocity 75mm shell emerges from a cloud of flame. It flashes across the distance and whistles just over Fleig's turret, narrowly missing its mark. The German commander gasps in disbelief. They are now left with a vulnerable side exposed to enemy fire. The Panther begins to turn its hull, and the turret follows, though it rotates slower than the hull itself. The Sherman gunner finally has the Panther in his sights and fires. The shell streaks across the field and smashes into the Panther's gun barrel, splitting it completely apart. For a moment, the crew in Fleig's tank cannot believe what they have seen. An impossible, lucky shot. Inside the Panther, the commander shouts for another shot, but he is met by the pale, shocked face of his gunner. The barrel is gone. The German Big Cat has been transformed into a toothless wreck. Fleig does not give the enemy any time to recover. Hit it again! An armor-piercing round tears into the Panther's hull, followed quickly by another. The left side of the tank rips open, and violent flames burst out. The German tank is consumed by fire, and none of the crew managed to escape the inferno. Fleig's men let out a cheer, but he is already looking past the burning wreckage. 3 Panzer IVs are approaching from behind, spreading out as they move forward. If Fleig is to survive this encounter, he must fire faster than the Germans. Gunner, shot, tank, 180. The gun swings toward the nearest Panzer IV. Fire! The shell punches straight through the German tank, knocking it out with a single blow. The Panzer IV is not nearly as resilient as the Panther. The Sherman immediately shifts its focus to the next target, but this time the Germans are faster to aim. A Panzer gun fixes its sights on the Sherman. However, before it can fire, another shell slams into that Panzer and blows it apart. Through the smoke rising over the crest of the hill, 2 mud-covered Shermans emerge. Fleig's other tanks have finally arrived to join the fight. For the first time that morning, Fleig allows himself a brief smile. They now hold the upper hand. The final Panzer IV swings its turret and attempts to fire while moving, but the shot goes wide. That was its last opportunity. Fleig's gunner steadies his aim, fires, and sends a round directly through the turret. The Panzer IV dies where it stands. With the Panther burning and the lead panzers destroyed, the German attack begins to falter. Smoke screens are deployed, engines reverse, and the surviving tanks pull away from the American positions. Fleig tracks a retreating Panzer IV as it turns, throwing mud from its tracks before disappearing into the haze. Miles away, an escaping Panzer rattles into the command area of the 116th Panzer Division. General Major Siegfried von Waldenberg listens to the grim report. Several Panzers and a Panther have been lost. How many? He asks. 3 Sherman tanks, sir, comes the reply. It is an unexpected and stinging defeat. Enemy tanks are few, but they might receive reinforcements. Von Waldenberg decides the Americans must be eliminated without hesitation. He orders all remaining panzers to move in their direction and burn everything to the ground. 13 Panthers begin moving toward the village, followed by Panzer IVs and supporting infantry. The Germans settle onto a far slope and take up their positions, staying just outside of bazooka range. Their tanks provide cover for the infantry and maintain a steady fire toward the American positions in the village. For the Americans, reinforcements are incredibly scarce. However, M10 tank destroyers led by First Lieutenant Turney W. Leonard from the 893rd Tank Destroyer Battalion arrive on the scene. Fleig, Hazlitt, and Leonard receive orders to initiate a counterattack. Despite their previous losses, they formulate a plan. With the Germans positioned on the hill and covered by trees, Fleig decides to take his Shermans to the crest to draw their fire. While the German tanks are focused on Fleig, Leonard is intended to swing to the right and get behind their armor with his M10s. If they can eliminate the armor, they can clear the path for the infantry. The morning brings a thick fog, and the M10 destroyers peel off to the right, taking the long way around. The three Shermans grind toward the crest. Through the mist, Fleig spots German armor on the opposite side, hidden among trees and haystacks. The Shermans are about to draw the fire of an entire German line. But Fleig pushes his doubts aside and orders his crew to target a Panzer in the middle of the formation. The shell screams across the field and bursts in the trees right beside a Panzer. Immediately, German crews scramble back into their tanks and look for the source of the fire. Muzzles flash as Panthers and Panzer IVs swing their turrets and begin firing upon the ridge. Shells whip low over the rise, ripping through branches and tree trunks behind the Shermans. The enemy has taken the bait. "Driver, back us down, now!" The Shermans drop behind the reverse slope for safety. Just as they reach cover, Fleig gives the next order. "Get back up again!" All three Shermans repeat the drill, climbing to the crest, firing quickly and dropping back before the return fire can land. From the German perspective, they see flashes appearing from different points on the crest, making it seem as though American armor is everywhere. "Concentrate all fire on that hill," the Germans command. They hammer the crest with tank fire, mortars, and artillery. One Sherman falls back, shrouded in smoke with a damaged turret that has become stuck. The fire is becoming too heavy to endure. Across the field, Leonard's tank destroyers are desperately trying to reach their positions. The enemy tanks and infantry clearly do not see them coming as they continue to fire at the Shermans. The risky plan is working, but they need to get closer to surprise the enemy from the flank. Suddenly, Leonard feels a violent jolt. He looks over the edge of his vehicle to see that his M10 is grounded on a stump or a rock. To his left, another M10 loses traction in the churned mud. The entire flank attack begins to grind to a halt. As the crews attempt to climb out, the German infantry spots them almost immediately. Mortars begin falling around the American armor, turning their open turrets into deadly traps. Machine gun fire snaps out from the tree line. Even while stuck, the M10s are powerful enough to kill German armor, but under such heavy fire, they cannot acquire their targets. "No eyes on target, sir." Leonard grabs his binoculars and climbs out of his M10. "Get ready to fire. I'll get you the eyes on target." Bullets whip past him as he runs toward the nearest slope. From that vantage point, he sees Panzers screened behind hay with firing lanes cut through them. Leonard turns and runs back, but a crack rings out, and he realizes a bullet has struck him in the arm. He stifles a scream of pain and pushes forward. He staggers back to the M10s and bangs on the hull of the nearest one. "Haystack! 200 yards! Traverse right!" The M10's 3-inch gun swings and fires with a hard crack. Leonard runs back toward the Germans before the smoke even clears. On the hill, the two remaining Shermans continue working the crest. Fleig looks to the right, hoping to see Leonard's M10s in position, but instead he sees them bunched up and stationary, nowhere near the enemy line. Fleig could retreat and save his platoon, but if he does, every German tank will turn its fury on the stranded M10s. He decides he must give them a fighting chance. "Those poor souls need our help. Maintain fire." To his left, a Sherman rolls up to take a shot, but it lingers a fraction of a second too long. A German shell bursts right in front of it. The tank backs down, miraculously still functional, but its turret ring has jammed from the shock. Now 2 of Fleig's 3 tanks are crippled. Only his tank remains fully operational, and he keeps it moving. He brings it up one more time and spots the side of a German tank through the smoke. Gunner, AP tank, 600. The round streaks across the field and hits hard, causing the German tank to jerk sideways as flames erupt. It is another kill for Fleig, but he pays for it instantly. A returning shell strikes the ground and ricochets into the Sherman's turret ring. His gunner yells, "We're jammed! I can't traverse!" Now all three Shermans are unable to fight back effectively. Fleig throws one last glance toward Leonard's M10s. He watches with his heart in his mouth as Leonard runs from cover to cover, directing fire upon the enemy. Then horror strikes as a mortar explodes right next to his comrade. Leonard goes down hard, his left arm shattered below the shoulder. Everything is a blur as medics run to him with morphine. They insist on moving him immediately, but Leonard shakes his head, knowing the Germans are closing in. "Leave me a rifle and get the hell out of here," he commands. It is the last time anyone sees him alive. There is nothing more Fleig can do. "Pull back!" The Shermans retreat from the crest and head for a shallow draw to the north. The Germans realize the ridge has been yielded and begin their advance, sweeping the field and village with artillery and tank fire. Behind the trees, Fleig stands by his wounded Sherman and watches Hazlitt as the last of the infantry pull back through the mud. Fleig has orders to destroy any equipment left behind. A crewman prepares a grenade, but Fleig stops him. "Let me do it." He ties the grenade to the hatch with a wire and reaches into the turret for the last time. The men descend into the dark gorge, hearing the muffled explosions of their own tanks. The forest swallows them as they navigate slopes slick with mud and broken branches. The men form a human chain, holding onto the shoulder or belt of the man ahead to find their way through the blackness. Then, enemy mortars find them. Shells crash into the gorge, breaking the chain and driving groups of men into the underbrush, where they disappear forever. Around midnight, Lieutenant Fleig and 6 exhausted soldiers finally reach the American assembly area at Wassenack. Of the more than 2,200 men of the Bloody Bucket Division who entered the fight, little more than 300 made it out. Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Fleig survived the war and was awarded the Silver Star for his heroic actions in the Hürtgen Forest. Lieutenant Turney W. Leonard was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. His body was eventually recovered in 1950 and returned to the United States, where he is buried in Dallas, Texas. If this story changed the way you look at the forgotten shadows of the forest, subscribe to our channel. We are unearthing the history they tried to bury. Plant the seeds for the future. The next treasury of the past will open soon.